Everyone, in this video what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue talking about ancient ethics, and in this case ancient Greek-Roman ethics here today. We're going to take a look at two philosophers that come from two other Greek traditions. We'll take a look at Epicurus, who is a part of and actually the founder of what is called Epicureanism, and then we'll take a look briefly at Epictetus, who is a philosopher of the Stoic tradition. So in ancient Greece, Plato was popular in his own day, and from the academy his influence kind of expanded even after his death. And Aristotle was popular in his own day, and his influence expanded after his death, especially because his student was Alexander the Great, and Alexander's influence spread all over southeastern Europe, North Africa, the Near East, the Middle East, all the way to India, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, spreading Greek influence over all those regions. It's one of the reasons why just a few centuries later the New Testament, which is one of the primary texts of Christianity, was written in Greek as opposed to some other language, because of the influence of the Greeks. Plato considered himself a student of Socrates, and Aristotle considered himself a student of Plato, though he would say, "Plato is dear to me, but dearer still is the truth." They didn't always agree on everything. But then also what happens in the Greek and Roman world, because what's going to happen is that Greek sphere of influence, for the most part, this little republic on the Italian peninsula of Rome, ends up absorbing and assimilating a lot of at least the Western Greek sphere of influence and takes it over. India and Persia and other places, you've got completely different things going on, different powers going in there, themselves interacting with Greek thought, culture, and civilization. But back in Greece, one of the other things that happen is there's a couple of different schools that develop that all see themselves as simply following what Socrates did. So remember, what Socrates did was he went around asking people questions, trying to get at the truth, claiming that I'm not the wisest person, I'm trying to figure out why everybody keeps talking nonsense, and is speaking as though they have knowledge when they really don't. So 4 different schools, in addition to what Plato and Aristotle are doing, pop up and consider themselves as we're followers of Socrates. And they're all doing something different. You could say it's denominations of Greek thought. One are this group called the Cynics, which is where we get our English word cynical today. And for them, the problem is society. Like what we saw with Socrates, it was all the people that were the higher-ups in society, the politicians and the poets and the artisans, all the people that were well-to-do. They're the ones who are so concerned with putting a front up of like, yeah, we're really intelligent, when they're not and don't really know what they're talking about. So really what we should do is we should embrace a getting away from society. Now, there's another tradition that develops later called skepticism, and skepticism, and of course we get our English word skeptical and skeptic from that today. The word skeptic comes from the Greek word skepsis, which means to question, but it means to question in this sense of don't take sides on an issue, to kind of step back and you can examine something without believing it. Basically, skepticism is the view that you should study all the different perspectives in the world, but you don't have to agree with any of them, but you should know them well and not characterize them unfairly. And then finally, that brings us to the 2 other schools that I do want to spend some time talking about here in this video. One is the Epicureans, founded by Epicurus. The brief take here is that really we should be focused on pleasure in life, and that's our pursuit, and it's virtuous to do so. And then there are the Stoics that say we should suppress emotion because emotion leads us to do things that are irrational and stupid, and so we should just do away with it. And there are several Stoic philosophers, both in Greece and later in Rome. In fact, a well-known Stoic philosopher is the Emperor Marcus Aurelius himself. We'll be taking a look briefly at the writings of Epictetus, who was not an emperor, but actually a slave. Well, let's take a look at a text by Diogenes Laertius, who is someone that comes later than Epicurus, but he records the basic beliefs of the Epicureans. What did Epicurus believe? Let's take a look. First of all, Diogenes Laertius starts off with a couple of statements about what the basic beliefs of the Epicureans are. Let's start with number 2. Death is nothing to us, for what has been dissolved has no sense experience, and what has no sense experience is nothing to us. So the Epicureans say they're not afraid of death because what happens when you die is nothing. Life is nothing but sense experience, what we can see, hear, smell, taste, and touch. That's what it means to be alive. So when you're dead, that's not happening anymore. Thirdly, the removal of all feeling of pain is the limit of the magnitude of pleasure. Wherever a pleasurable feeling is present, for as long as it is present, there is neither feeling of pain nor feelings of distress, nor both together. So pleasure is actually removing pain in many ways. So The Epicureans are all about a life of pleasure. Now, when people hear that, even in the ancient world, they said, oh, you must like to engage in sexual indulgence and orgies and drinking and bacchanalia. But notice what is said here in section 5. It's impossible to live pleasantly without living prudently, honorably, and justly, and impossible to live prudently, honorable, and justly without living pleasantly. And whoever lacks this cannot live pleasantly. So already, what this has in common with Aristotle is that these are virtues. These are excellences in life. You are to live prudently, honorably, and justly. These kinds of virtues must be cultivated. They're different than the ones for Aristotle, but the idea of virtue is what we see here that's similar. Section 8. No pleasure is a bad thing in itself, but the things which produce certain pleasures bring troubles many times greater than the pleasures. Something might seem like a really good idea and really pleasant right now, but in the long run it won't be pleasurable, so that's actually not a good thing. So that's why Epicurus says you really shouldn't engage in certain kinds of indulgence, because it might seem like a good idea at the time, but it actually produces more pain in the long run, and you shouldn't do that. Section 14. The purest security is that which comes from a quiet life and withdrawal from the many, although a certain degree of security from other men does come by means of the power to repel attacks and by means of prosperity. Really, the quiet life away from civilization, getting to enjoy pleasure, is what we should seek, although you want to be able to defend yourself and prosper. Section 17. The just life is most free from disturbance, and the unjust life is full of the greatest disturbance. Those who are unjust end up having the most pain and end up really causing pain themselves. The just life is free from those kinds of pain because the just life is the best kind of life. And in section 27, Epicurus tells us explicitly what kinds of pleasures are really the best. He says, of the things which wisdom provides for the blessedness of one's whole life, by far the greatest is the possession of friendship. So when he's talking about pleasure, yeah, people, even in the ancient world, like I said, would say, oh, they're all about sexual indulgence and just engaging in pleasures all the time to a ridiculous animalistic degree. And he said here, the best kind of pleasure is having a really good friend and that kind of bond together. That's the kind of pleasure that we can experience and that we ought to pursue. So for Epicurus and the Epicureans, goodness may be understood as being essentially equivalent with pleasure. But pleasure not just meaning pleasure indiscriminately, anything that feels good, but especially what Epicurus would call the higher pleasures. Friendship, reading a good book, enjoying good food, even all those things together. Not merely sexual indulgence, although Epicurus would say those things are good too. But pleasure is not reducible to merely those kinds of pleasures that human beings have in common with animals. An animal can experience sexual pleasure, an animal can experience enjoying food, an animal can experience having a good time playing. We can do those things too, but what makes human pleasures of reading and contemplation and friendship especially valuable are the kinds of pleasures that only humans can experience. Now let's transition into looking at a work by Epictetus called the Enchiridion, which means the handbook. And this is a work of Stoic philosophy, very different from the Epicureans, but nevertheless, the Stoics, and Epictetus in particular, also conceive of what they're doing as being about virtue. So Epictetus begins his Enchiridion with this. Some things are up to us, and some are not up to us. Our opinions are up to us. And our impulses, desires, aversions, in short, whatever's our own doing. Our bodies are not up to us, nor our possessions, our reputations, or our public offices, or that is, whatever is not our own doing. The things that are up to us are by nature free, unhindered, and unimpeded. The things that are not up to us are weak, enslaved, hindered, not our own. So remember, if you think that things naturally enslaved are free, or things not your own are your own, you'll be thwarted, miserable, and upset, and will blame both gods and men. But if you think that only what is yours, and that what is not your own, just as it is, not your own, then no one will ever coerce you. No one will hinder you. No one will blame you. You will not accuse anyone. You will not do a single thing unwillingly. You will have no enemies, and no one will harm you because you will not be harmed at all. Epictetus is making the claim here that, again, some things are up to us and some things are not. And the things that are not up to you, don't worry about them. So the things that are not up to your choice, don't fret about. You didn't ask for the body that you were born into, so don't complain about it. Now, things that are in your control, like diet and exercise, that's one thing. But in terms of the actual body you have, you had no control on that, so don't worry about it. The only things you should worry about are the things that are in your control. And this is the primary principle of Stoicism. Only worry about the things that are in your control. And you can do stuff about that which you can control. But part of being a good Stoic is recognizing what stuff is in my control and what stuff is not. What kinds of stuff are in your control? Your opinions, your thoughts, what you think about stuff, that's up to you. Sometimes we think of it as automatic. That makes me angry. No, it doesn't. You don't have to let it make you angry, whatever it is. And so a great principle of Stoicism is go with the flow. Whatever happens, happens. The things that are up to you, that you can control, work on those things. The things that are not up to you, you can't deal with that stuff. There's nothing that you can do to change it. That's why he says in section 3, in the case of everything attractive or useful, or that you are fond of, remember to say just what sort of thing it is, beginning with the least little things. If you're fond of a jug, you have your favorite cup. Say, I'm fond of a jug, for then when it's broken, you will not be upset. Stuff breaks. It's not really in your control. It's just a jug. It's just a cup. It's whatever. However, he takes this to another level. For when it's broken, you'll not be upset. If you kiss your child or your wife, say that you're kissing a human being, for when it dies, you will not be upset. You might be thinking, wait a minute. I will be upset if my child dies, or if my spouse dies, or if my significant other dies. I would be upset. Yeah, but Epictetus is saying, people die all the time. That's something not in your control. He's not trying to be callous here as such. He's simply saying, like, no, people die. That's a thing that happens. Get ready for it. That's why he says in section 5, what upsets people is not things themselves, but their judgments about things. You think things upset you, they don't. You let yourself be upset. Now notice here, then after that, he channels Socrates, because that's what all these Greek traditions are doing. They're channeling Socrates as their model and exemplar. He says, for example, death is nothing dreadful, or else it would appear dreadful to Socrates when he had to be executed. But instead, it's the judgment about death that's dreadful. That's what's dreadful. So when we are thwarted or upset or distressed, let us never blame someone else, but rather ourselves. That is, our own judgments. So things don't make you angry. You get angry. He continues, an uneducated person accuses others when he's doing badly. Yeah, it's your fault. A partly educated person accuses himself. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. An educated person accuses neither someone nor himself. That's just the way it is. Section 6. Do not be joyful about any superiority that is not your own. That is, that you did not own and choose and make yourself. If a horse were to say joyfully, I'm beautiful, one could put up with it. But certainly you, as a human being, when you say joyfully, I have a beautiful horse, look what I own, are joyful about the good of the horse, what then is your own? You didn't make the horse. Sure, you own it as such. Okay, in terms of you being in possession of it, but you didn't make that happen. Your way of dealing with appearances. So whenever you are in accord with nature in your way of dealing with appearances, then be joyful, since then you are joyful about a good of your own. Only be really happy about that which you made happen. Section 8. Do not seek to have events happen as you want them to, but instead want them to happen as they do happen, and your life will go well. So when we get our hopes up high and we're like, I really hope this plays out this way, and then we feel disappointed. Your team didn't win the Super Bowl. You didn't get that job promotion. Well, stuff wasn't completely up to you. It was up to a bunch of other factors. Let things happen as they happen. Again, go with the flow. And if you do that, if you just say, whatever happens, happens, you'll be a lot happier at the end of the day, because you won't get your expectations high and then get upset. Section 11, taken to the extreme. Never say about anything, I have lost it, but instead I've given it back to the universe. Did your child die? It was given back. Did your wife die? She was given back. My land was taken, so this too was given back. But the person who took it was bad. How does the way the giver asked for it back concern you? As long as he gives it, take care of it as something that is not your own, just as travelers treat an inn. No possession is your own. You're basically a steward of it. If you lose it, it's not really a part of you. Life happens. Section 12. If you want to make progress, give up all considerations like these. If I neglect my property, I'll have nothing to live on. If I do not punish my slave boy, he will be bad. It's better to die of hunger with distress and fear gone than to live upset in the midst of plenty. If you have a lot and you're whining about life, you're an idiot. It is better for a slave boy to be bad than for you to be in a bad state, having a bunch of stuff and whining about it. Begin, therefore, with little things. A little oil is spilled, a little wine is stolen. So let's say you're someone that's rich. Stuff gets broken, people drop stuff, even your own employees or slaves in this instance steal stuff. That's fine. Whatever. Who cares? This is the price of tranquility. This is the price of not being upset. Now keep in mind, Epictetus is writing this as a slave. Nothing comes for free. When you call the slave boy, keep in mind that he's capable of not paying attention, and even if he does pay attention, he's capable of not doing any things that you want him to do. But he is not in such a good position that your being upset or not depends on him. You're mad with other people, you're not mad at them. Your anger and your madness is on you. Section 14. You're foolish if you want your children and your wife and your friends to live forever, so you're not wanting things to be up to you that are not up to you, and things to be yours that are not yours. You are stupid in the same way that if you want your slave boy would be faultless, since you're wanting badness, not to be badness, but something else. But wanting not to fail to get what you desire. This you are capable of. A person's master is someone who has power over what he wants or does not want, either to obtain it or take it away. Whoever wants to be free, and this is the goal of Stoicism, to be free in the sense of going with the flow. Therefore, let him not want to avoid anything that is up to others. Otherwise, he will necessarily be a slave. Those who say, "Oh no, I'm worried about this kind of thing," that kind of person, the person who's worried about stuff, worried about things happening that are not in their control, that's actually the real slave. Is that, according to Epictetus. Section 16. When you see someone weeping in grief at the departure of his child or the loss of his property, like his kid dies, his property gets stolen, take care not to be carried away by the appearance that the externals he involved in are bad, and be ready to say immediately, what weighs this man down is not what happened, since it does not weigh down on someone else, but his judgment about it. He's sad because he's making himself sad. She's sad because she's making herself sad. Whatever happens, happens. Do not hesitate, however, and this is interesting, to sympathize with him verbally. Look, we can have this stoic attitude of whatever happens, happens, but when people are going through stuff, that's intense. Be with people in that. Okay? Sympathize. I'm sorry that happened to you. And even to moan with him if the occasion arises. I'm so sorry that happened to you. But be careful not to moan inwardly. Don't let that overtake you to the point where you say, I can't believe this happened, and mean it. Because you should believe that it happened, because it does happen, and it happens all the time. Section 33. Set up, right now, a certain character and pattern for yourself, which you will preserve when you are by yourself and when you're with people. This is coming up with the notion of integrity. Come up with it. Develop it. Cultivate it. Who are you going to be? Not merely when you're with other people, but when you're by yourself, and make those be the same person. Be silent for the most part. Keep your mouth shut. Or say what you have to in a few words. Don't talk too much. Speak rarely when the occasion requires speaking, but not just about any topic that comes up. Not about gladiators, horse races, athletes, eating or drinking. The things that always come up. And especially if it's about people, talk without blaming or praising or complaining. Divert by your own talk, if you can, the talk of those with you to something appropriate. If you happen to be stranded among strangers, do not talk. Do not laugh a great deal or at a great many things, or unrestrainedly. Refuse to swear oaths altogether if possible. Yeah, no, I promise I'll do that. Stop it. Don't make promises you can't keep, or otherwise as circumstances allow. Avoid banquets given by those outside philosophy, because parties are weird and strange things will happen. But if the appropriate occasion arises, take great care not to slide into their ways, since certainly if a person's company is dirty, the person who spends time with him, even if he happens to be clean, is bound to become dirty too. Don't be affected by other people. Being around other people who think indiscriminately and just think whatever about whatever, you're around them, you'll be affected by it too. Don't do that. If someone reports back to you that so-and-so is saying bad things about you, do not reply to them but answer, obviously he didn't know my other bad characteristics, since otherwise he wouldn't just have mentioned those. So when someone speaks bad about you, he just said, oh, imagine if they knew the other bad things about me too. Don't take offense, because if you do, you've decided to take offense. That's letting you affect yourself in a way. It's not them affecting you, it's you affecting you and deciding to think otherwise, and that clouds your judgment. Section 34. This is kind of against Epicurus. Whenever you encounter some kind of apparent pleasure, hey, this looks good, be on guard, as in the case of other appearances, not to be carried away by it, but let the thing wait for you and allow yourself to delay. Then bring before your mind 2 times, both the time when you enjoyed the pleasure and the time when after enjoying it you later regret it and berate yourself. And set against these the way you will be pleased and praise yourself if you refrain from it. So sometimes you do things that you like and then afterwards you're either kind of indifferent about it or you don't like it, or I shouldn't have done that. Remember both those. The intensity of the pleasure, but also the after effect, and remember that and hold those in your mind when you're considering, should I do this thing that feels pleasurable? Think about it. Section 41. Don't get lost in physicality. It shows a lack of natural talent to spend time on what concerns the body. In other words, stuff that involves the body, that's not high tier stuff. It's very low tier. As in exercising a great deal, oh, you work out. Eating a great deal, oh, you like to eat. Drinking a great deal, oh, you can drink a lot. Moving one's bowels or copulating a great deal, I love that. Oh, you spend a lot of time in the bathroom or you spend a lot of time having sex. Ooh, good for you. Instead, you must do these things in passing. A lot of them are things that you gotta do. You should take care of your body, you should eat, you should drink, you should use the bathroom occasionally, and perhaps you should even engage in sexual activity. But turn your whole attention towards your faculty of judgment. That's what's most important, not this stuff with the body. Section 44. Keep this in mind when people insult you. These statements are not valid inferences. I'm richer than you, therefore I'm superior to you. Or I'm more eloquent than you, therefore I'm superior to you. But rather, these are valid. I'm richer than you, therefore my property is superior to yours. Again, showing that it's not in your control, it's something external. I'm more eloquent than you, therefore my speaking is superior to you. I'm not better than you. Maybe certain things that I have are better than the things you have, but I cannot be better than you. You can't be better than me, because you are not identical with your property nor with your speaking, for example. That's not you. And notice section 53, what he does here is he channels Socrates. He says, on every occasion you must have these thoughts ready. Lead me, Zeus. And you too, Destiny. Wherever I'm assigned by you, I'll follow and not hesitate. That's a fancy way of saying whatever happens, happens. I'll go with the flow. I'll follow and not hesitate. But even if I do not wish to, because I'm bad, I'll follow anyway. I'll do what I have to do. Whoever has complied well with necessity is counted wise by us and understands divine affairs. Well, Crito, if it's pleasing to the gods this way, then let it happen this way. That's channeling Crito. Remember I told you that's the story where Crito is one of the friends that tries to break Socrates out of prison. He says, I can't do this. This is not what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to follow the law. And Antaius and Miletus can kill me, but they can't harm me. That also comes from Crito. Antaius and Miletus are the people that were bringing Socrates up on charges. And he says, they can bring charges against me all they want. They can execute me, but they can't hurt me, because I decide what hurts me. And that's the Stoic mindset of virtue. So again, the virtue of the Stoics is understanding and the excellence there of, I'm not going to be swayed by emotions, and I'm not going to be swayed by circumstances outside of my control. I'm going to go with the flow, and I know there is wisdom in that. That's Stoicism. Now, in modern lingo, to be stoic means to be kind of just emotionless. Someone that doesn't express emotions is called stoic. And the Stoics would say, yeah, because emotions are stupid. They lead you astray. You think things you shouldn't think. You know, if you've ever been through a breakup, you've thought, like, I can't live without this person. And then later you get some time and some clarity happens. And that's exactly what the Stoics are talking about. That emotion manipulates your understanding and your reason. And there's a bunch of things out there. Emotion, but not merely emotion, that manipulate under our understanding. Our virtue is to be consigned to reason and proper thought, and the fact that whatever happens, happens, and some things are in our control and some things are not, and it's wisdom to know the difference. That's Stoicism. That's another perspective here in the ancient world that's a big deal in Rome. Some of the most important figures in Rome, like Seneca, a senator in Rome. But the point I want to emphasize is this is another tradition that emphasizes virtue in the ancient world, this time in the Greek and Roman tradition. What we're going to do next time is we're going to go away from the Western world and we're going to take a look at a little bit of Chinese ethics in the work of Kongzi and Mozi, or Confucius and Mozi. And we'll take a look at them and see how they're similar to some of the things I've talked about so far, but also doing something a little bit different too.